could not help but think as we sang tonight of a pretty famous man who's a pastor of a church. He's what's called a theologian. His name's A.W. Tozer, and he once said this, that Christians don't tell lies. We sing them. And I just started to think about when we sing songs, some of the phrases that come out of our mouths are not actually what is practiced with our lives. Because it's great to sing of how great God is, and we trust that that's a biblical truth that we are to run with. But there are times that my life and that your life does not actually sing that. Amen. So my hope for us is that we'll realize that that should make us a little uncomfortable. How many of you have ever been uncomfortable at any point in your life? Me too. It happens from time to time. I told you last night that we have a 3-year-old named Shepherd and a 4-month-old named Charlie. Last year, we were at my grandmother's house, and Shepherd and I were watching television, and we saw a commercial for something that was coming to town, this musical of sorts that you're probably familiar with. It's entitled Sesame Street Live. You've probably seen that. If you don't know what Sesame Street Live is, it's basically this whole show that's wrapped around this character named Elmo. Elmo is to a 3-year-old what Justin Bieber is to a teenage girl. They just go crazy. He loves it. So we see the commercial for Sesame Street Live, and the commercial lets us know that if we were to call at that very moment, that we could get backstage passes to Sesame Street Live. And I've got this vision in my head as to what a backstage pass for Sesame Street Live looks like. So I'm making the phone call, and I'm on the phone with the lady, and I make a purchase of 2 tickets, one for my son and one for my wife. Because I was going to be out of town. And after I had purchased the 2 tickets for them, we were just getting juiced about Sesame Street Live. Shepherd kept saying Elmo, Elmo over and over. We're talking about what backstage of Sesame Street Live is going to look like, and I've got this idea that when we go backstage to Sesame Street Live, when they walk backstage, the Cookie Monster is going to be walking around with a tray full of cookies, and Big Bird's going to be walking around with a tray full of chicken legs, as cannibalistic as that sounds. They're going to be lavishing their love upon these little 3-year-olds. My wife calls me, and she's in the line. I'm driving back from Birmingham, and she said, Chad, this is really weird back here because there are now 2 lines, chairs at the front of each line, and there are characters sitting in the chair. In one line, the very long line, there's a character named Elmo. In the shorter line, there's a character named Rosita. If you're not familiar with Sesame Street Live, Rosita is a tertiary character. That means 3rd level, meaning she's only on once a season. So they've got these 2 characters waiting for the children, and Hope said to me, Chad, the closer that we get to Elmo, the more petrified Shepherd becomes. And I started to think about when he watches Elmo on television and hears Elmo speak 3rd person about himself, he gets really excited and he sings the song. But when he's there looking at Elmo in the face, he is completely scared of him. And she lets me know, this running update, Chad, he is mortified. He can barely move. He's tearing up. And it hit me. When you're watching Elmo on television, he's the same size as you. Right now, when you're looking at Elmo live, you are seeing a full-grown man who has made the decision that my life will be dedicated to dressing up and dancing around and hugging little children. So, Shepherd's there in the line waiting for Sesame Street Live. I'm in Birmingham, midway between my house and Birmingham, and I realize if I floor the car, I can get to Sesame Street Live before the show starts. So that's exactly what I did. I started just rounding corners, going as quickly as I could based upon what the speed limit was. I pull into Chattanooga 3 minutes before the show's about to start. I pull into the parking lot where this young man says to me, that will be $7 to park, looking at me very awkwardly. And I said, I'm not paying $7. So I leave the parking lot, begin to look for a place on the side of the road. I park on the side of the road. When I park on the side of the road, I begin to scurry out of my car towards the auditorium where Sesame Street Live is playing, walking very quickly, and as I'm walking, I'm seeing these moms and dads with their little toddlers also walking into the show, and I'm walking all by myself. It doesn't hit me. I get inside, I stand in line again, I'm waiting at the line to get my ticket to Sesame Street Live, and while I wait in line by myself, these moms and dads are also waiting in line with their children. They're hugging their children, holding them closely to themselves. I get to the front of the line. The lady at the front of the line begins to have a conversation with me. I said, I need one ticket. And she gives me this awkward look. Like, really? And I said, my wife's already in there. She shakes her, yeah, So we're having that conversation. I then get in the final line where they're going to check my ticket, and when I'm waiting there, I notice that there's this police officer in the corner of my eye, and he will not take his eyes off of me, at least in my imagination, and it hits me. They think I'm a creeper. Like, they think that's what I'm here for. I go through the line, I walk in, I find my wife, I find my son. We enjoy Sesame Street Live, but the entire time, here's what I thought while waiting to get my ticket. Everyone around me feels uncomfortable because of my presence. And today, in your Bible study, you talked about what it means for you to relate to those who are lost. And let's just be truthful. What it means for you to have conversations with those who do not have a relationship with Jesus. And the way that means that you at times are going to make people uncomfortable. If your God is really as great as you sing that He is. To make people uncomfortable. And we're going to bear weight on the idea that who we are in the moment will not always be pleasing to everyone who sees us, everyone who talks to us, everyone who communicates with us. We get to the book of Acts, chapter 9, and we find there's this guy by the name of Saul, who will eventually become Paul, and he makes everybody uncomfortable. Here's why. He likes to kill Christians. Killing people never makes anyone who does not kill people comfortable. Acts chapter 9, let's roll. Saul, still breathing threats and murder against the disciples of the Lord, went to the high priest and asked him for letters to the synagogues at Damascus. Very quickly, Saul is what we know as a Pharisee. If you grew up singing cheesy children's musical, you will know that if you're a Pharisee, you're not so fair, you see. So Saul's a Pharisee, and he hates Christians so much that this takes place. There was another group of people that Saul hated. They were called the Sadducees. And in this area that he's going to in Damascus, history teaches us that the high priest that this talks about is a Sadducee. Saul hates Christians to the point that he makes a deal with someone else who he cannot stand. And after making this deal, at the end of verse 2, so that if he found any belonging to the way, men or women, he might bring them bound to Jerusalem. I love the use of the word, the way, in this passage, and here's why I like it. Luke uses the term Christian 2 times throughout the book, throughout all of his writings. And when he uses it in this way, as if those who are talking about them call them Christians. When Luke begins to identify who we are as followers of Jesus, he does not use that phrase. He says that you're a member of the way, which means that you are defined not simply by what you believe, but by what you do and where you go with what you believe. So often, the way that we respond to faith in Jesus is simply this. We have a list of beliefs, and if our beliefs are not in fact practiced, then by the moment of looking at this, we have to realize that that's not, in actuality, belief. Because belief is the idea of a sentiment, the idea of an affection combined with action. What you believe, when it takes root in who you are, begins to transform you. So they're known as the way, verse 3. Now as he went on his way, he approached Damascus, and suddenly a light from heaven flashed around him. And falling to the ground, he heard a voice